another installment of SRT Amplification. Today we're going to be taking a look at a 1951 Gibson BR-6 amplifier. It's a push-pull type Class AB amplifier, and we're going to be looking at what we're going to do with it. A little more in depth than we went over in the previous video. If you hadn't seen my previous video, go back and watch that. I covered 3 projects I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks, and one of them is whatever we're going to do with this BR-6, and then I'm going to be doing something with a little amplifier that came out of an old 50s record player and a tube amp, Hammond tube amp preamp out of a Hammond organ. Really don't know what I'm going to do with that yet, but that's going to be a fun project. But I'm probably going to be working on these concurrently, so you'll see videos mixed in, part 1 of this, part 1 of that, part 2 of this, part 2 of that, sporadically. So once we get all this done, I'll have another teaser video, hopefully for 2 or 3 more projects on down the line, and then maybe some tech tips and stuff mixed in. But without further ado, let's get this thing up here. But in the meantime, while I'm getting this up here, go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, now we have this thing up on the bench. If you'll remember from the previous video, it's what it looks like. The Tolex has seen better days, but overall it's still in really good shape. Now, I have to make a confession. Usually I like to, see things for the first time as I'm videoing them. But I actually made a rookie mistake this morning, and I did this whole video this morning, and I accidentally deleted it. So we're going to cut through the chase on a lot of things because I've already seen inside this thing. What I did discover though, and we knew yesterday, I showed that this 2-prong had been converted to a 3-prong, so I knew somebody had been in here previously. But what I didn't realize at the time, that I do now, is that we have a mismatching of screws that's holding this chassis in here. And when I say a mismatching of screws, you can see on the faceplate here we have flathead screws, and in other places like up on top we have Phillips head screws. So we have flatheads here and flatheads along this side, and we have Phillips over here. So that tells me that somebody has been in here monkeying around. They lost some screws at one point. Phillips head screws weren't even invented until the 30s, and they weren't really widely used until late in the 40s. And so most of the amps around this era, especially early 50s, pretty much all flathead screws. So that's a clue right there that somebody lost some screws. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stick all these screws in a little container here. Now, about my containers though, I found that the Great Value Honey Ham and the Great Value Roast Beef works best for containers for screws and stuff, so always keep a lot of those around. The turkey and the pastrami, they're no good, but the honey ham and the roast beef seem to work the best. So get these screws off here. Now this is really unique how this chassis, well, I say unique, I mean I've worked on a lot of 60s amplifiers, 70s, 80s, all the way up, and you typically have a chassis that's a 3-sided chassis and everything's tucked inside of it. Well, this is not the case on this one. This is only a 2-sided chassis, really. It's just a piece of folded metal that's basically screwed with wood screws onto these blocks here. I don't know if you can get a picture of that or not, but you can see these wood blocks back there. So I'm going to take this up. You know what? Before I do this, I'll tell you what. I already ran through the tube test on all these, but I want to show you something that I found on this. Now, I'm not a big, you know, I'm not a big tube tester guy. You gotta use a tube tester. But what I found in using the tube tester is that you learn a lot about the tubes. You learn a lot about the dependability of the tube. I guess the lifespan of the tube, how much life it's got left in it. And I guess the only reason I would really want to know that is, in this case, maybe if I've still got quite a bit of life left on these, I might actually use them. If it looks like they're kind of borderline as to how much longer they're going to last, I might take them out and use other tubes in this amp if I was going to use this amp. And then if I was going to, you know, sell this amp as a restored or, you know, vintage amp or something like that, put the original ones back in there, knowing that they didn't have much life left on them. You see what I mean? So that's one thing I think you can probably get out of a tube tester, is probably like the lifespan of the tube. Now the quality test on a tube tester, especially these ones that most people have, and I've got several different ones. I've got a Superior Instruments Company one. I have one in this big box right here. You know, these are the type of tube testers that a lot of radio and TV repairmen back in the day were using. They didn't have these huge gargantuan tube testers, you know, that actually put the tube under test at the proper voltages and stuff like that. Mainly your big, you know, tube manufacturers, labs, stuff like that. Maybe the military, big agencies and stuff like that that really needed to have exacting specs on their tubes and stuff like that may have a machine like that. But your everyday radio repairman, TV repairman back in the day had something like this, and that's what he had to go off of. And the biggest thing you can tell about on one of these devices, let me pull it up here. We'll just go ahead and use this one. The biggest thing you can tell about one of these devices is whether or not any of the elements in the tube is shorted or not. Go ahead and plug this in. So, what I did find, like I said, I already tested all these. I have no shorts. But what I found in this one 6V6 tube, right here, let me go ahead and set it up for 6V6. In this one 6V6 tube, I found it to be 6.3 to... Really don't need this for this test, but I'm going to go and sit on there. 4, okay, and then 30 amps, and then okay, so stick this on here. Let's get these things warmed up. But you're going to see here in a minute that the where's the index? The quality of this tube is showing up in the bad region. Now, there's no like quantifiable value to these numbers here. I like to think of it as, you know, 0% to 100% tube life, and I think that's the way most people look at it. But I'm going to take this camera off here so you can get a look at this. But the quality on this one is showing to be below 40 in the bad region, and all the rest of the tubes were up around in between 65 and 75, somewhere in that area. So this one is working, but I'm definitely going to look for a new old stock replacement for it with a better reading. So that's that. That's probably as in depth as I'm going to go into the testing of these tubes, because I know how it's a sore subject for some people. So I'll just cut it off right there as far as tube testing goes. Okay, so I'll pull all the tubes out of here so we can get this thing out and look at it. One more thing about the tubes though, and I'll leave the whole tube testing thing alone. If you're going to be testing tubes, you have to realize that your rectifier tubes, when you test those, they have such a high loading that on one of these tube testers, you'll actually see on the scroll, when you find that tube in the scroll, it'll actually give you a value that's good. So for instance, like the rectifier tube that was in here the 5Y3. It said that the about anything over 40 was good. So, and it was over 40. So, just a little side note on that. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so let's pull this thing out of here, and I'm not going to disconnect it from the speaker right now. We'll go into that in another video. I just want to get a quick look at this. And you know, yesterday I didn't know what I was going to find in here, but as we can see, I'll let you guys get a close look at this, and you can tell me what you see. Okay, so somebody came in here and replaced all the electrolytic capacitors, obviously. Now I don't know how good of a job they did. So this one over here looks really kind of shady to me. Also, they used really, which I mean for this amp, no more current than it's going to draw. I'm sure it's good, but they use really small gauged power cable here. This is like, it looks smaller than 14 to me. I'm not sure if it says on the outside jacket here. It's really small. It probably is 14. Yeah, it's 3 by 14. Okay, so that's good. I mean, that's good up to 10 amps at least. So this thing's never going to draw 10 amps. So that's that. Big power transformer here. And look, everything else, the tube sockets, the resistors, everything looks to be original. So it's looking like it just had a cap job and a power cord change, and that's about it. There was never a depth capacitor to ground on the power side on this amp, so they didn't have to do anything with that. There's not a marking on this side of the transformer. We'll have to look at the other side. So that's all there is to that. I mean, like I said, it's just a volume pot, right? So no tone circuit. So basically all you have is your tubes and your resistors and your capacitors. That is about it. Let's see what we can see on this side here. I don't know how far I can pull it out where we can get a look at this. I really cannot see it. Well, after further inspection, I think I can see the last 3 numbers that are stamped on there, just barely visible. The last 3 numbers stamped on there is 112. Can't see the preceding numbers, but if that's correct, then that would be the 12th week of 1951. So that's right there when this amp was supposed to be made. And if we look right here on the speaker, we have 385115. So that'd be the 15th week of 1951. And I'm not familiar with the 385 code. I will have to look at that. I'm sure somebody out there knows exactly what the 385. I mean, I'm very versed in the Jensens and all that, but 385, I'm gonna have to look at that. Okay, so I did a quick search on this and I could not find a 385 code. I do know that there are some amps that Gibson was putting out, at least in 1952, that they used Jensen. I know that that code is 220, but I do not recognize this code. So if anybody out there viewing this knows right off their head, because I know some of you guys know these transformer and speaker codes like the back of your hand. If you know what a 385 is, I would love to know what type of speaker this is. The date puts it where it could be an original speaker, but not knowing if Gibson ever put this brand of speaker in here, I can't say with 100% that this is the original speaker, but it is a 1951 speaker with a voice coil, electrodynamic field coil, and the output transformer mounted to the speaker basket itself. So that's that in a nutshell. I really found it interesting that they mounted the chassis the way they did. Very efficient, cost savings, I'm sure, both in labor and material costs, and I really don't see anything wrong with it except for the fact that it's just strange, I guess. It's not what you're used to seeing in a normal chassis. But for some of you guys who've worked on these old 40s and 50s, you've probably seen this stuff all the time. This is kind of a new one on me. So the next part of this, part 2 of this video, is going to be what we're going to do with this thing. You know, I'm going to draw up some stuff on what we might want to do with it. Before we decide on what we're going to do with it, though, we're probably going to, you know, play something through it and see what you guys think about the sound. And I'll kind of let you guys decide what's going to happen with this, because it's one of those things. You can keep it the way it is because it sounds killer, or it sounds like crap, and you can mod it to make it sound killer. If I do any mods to it, it'll definitely be mods that are non-invasive, something that's reversible. I'm not going to be drilling any holes in this chassis. I'm not going to be, you know, doing anything that I can't absolutely go back with just a few solder connections, take something out of the circuit, put it back the way it was. So that'll be something for us to decide. So look out for part 2 on this video. The Gibson, the 1951 Gibson BR-6, and we'll play it. We'll put a guitar through it. I don't have any 50s guitars, but I do have a 1965 Fender Music Master we can put through this thing, and maybe we'll put a telly through it, more modern guitar, and maybe something with a humbucker. Although I don't think they had humbuckers at the time this amp was built, so this thing's definitely not looking for a humbucker input on this thing. So we'll see what it sounds like with several guitars, and we'll go from there. Thank you for watching.